You know, it doesn't matter if I like everything about the PlatiMons or any speaker for that matter. Regardless of how I feel, the truth is there are aspects of these speakers that I believe people will appreciate. There's nothing wrong with their preferences, and I have a different perspective. That's perfectly fine as well. After all, we might simply be chasing different audio dragons, and that's okay. As far as I can see, what the hi-fi community needs more than ever is uncompromising honesty from reviewers. We need to be straightforward, describe exactly what we hear, support our assessments with evidence when possible, and present our reviews to allow you to make your own decisions on what you might like. So, for this review, I will step aside and I will do exactly that. I might not have a strong liking for everything the PlatiMons have to offer, but that won't stop me from providing an accurate assessment of their sound, because what I don't prefer could be precisely what you are searching for, so let's do this. Now, before we crack the door open and shine a light on the PlatiMons, along with a long list of fantastic audiophile goodies, can be found in a place that you might not expect. No, I'm not talking about the fine folks at Safe and Sound this time. I'm actually pointing a finger at the one and only Audio Art Cable. I know you didn't see that coming, did you? I mean, sure, Audio Art Cable does indeed offer a plethora of great cables for every budget, but check this out. They also offer amplifiers, DACs, turntables, headphones, music servers, and so much more. That's right, folks. The days of AAC being just another cable company are long behind us, and they are now a one-stop shop for anything that your audiophile heart desires. So yeah, take a minute, bookmark Audio Art Cable, and a massive thanks to AAC for sponsoring today's show. Every now and then, a speaker might show up and surprise me in one way or another. Whether it's the build quality, engineering, finish, voicing, or technology being used, there are indeed times when a speaker shows up and I stop, take a moment, and I say to myself, now that's something that I didn't expect. The PlatiMons are that kind of loudspeaker. With a two-way virtual coaxial design, the PlatiMon offers a pair of 5-inch drivers and an air motion tweeter, along with high-quality capacitors and inductors housed in an all-aluminum enclosure. Yeah, that's right. When you tap on these speakers, the only thing that you hear is the thud of your knuckles hitting cold metal. I have to say, I've always been tempted to test drive Magico speakers, and when Monacoustics knocked on the door to let me check out a speaker using a similar approach, I had to say yes. So, let's get this part of the review right. The build quality and finish on the PlatiMons is perfect. Every seam and line is precise, and the overall look of these speakers is quite frankly astonishing. The front baffle does offer some interesting lines and edges that surround the AMT, which serves as a waveguide. While the intended waveguide does look cool, my initial concern was diffraction. Before even turning these speakers on, I had a feeling that some higher frequencies might bounce off some of these sharp edges, but it was hard to say if and how audible that was going to be. In a phone call with Monacoustics, they mentioned that diffraction was indeed a compromise in their design approach, and I gotta say, they were fantastic to chat with over the phone. My gut tells me that even though this won't be a total celebration of this speaker, they will at least respect what and how I say what I'm about to say. So, sit back, relax, get comfortable, let's fire these up and get to work as we figure out how these PlatiMons are going to perform across the board. The first track, Birds, an audiophile favorite from Dominique Fils-Aimé for a dang good reason, played on the PlatiMons, revealed one noteworthy attribute right out of the gate. The sound of the bass did offer an interesting sense of depth. Even more, while I thought it was gimmicky having two different lengths of ports on the back of the PlatiMons, with the marketing notion that this concept creates a sense of, you guessed it, depth, well, even if these guys are full of horse manure and this has nothing to do with two different port lengths, a sense of depth in the bass extension is exactly what I heard right away, so that's that. Because I don't have a way of knowing how much these ports are affecting the bass, or if that's just one piece of the sonic puzzle, and I'm guessing that's probably true, I'll say that the bass depth and scale is pretty dang impressive. Monoacoustic notes 45 Hz in the specifications of the PlatiMons, and they are probably being conservative with that assessment. With that being said, these woofers are polypropylene, and I must mention that texture or intricate details in some bass notes wasn't quite as clear or precise as some of the best paper cone examples that we have spent time with. Being honest, I hear more of the bass note being crafted as opposed to the natural sound of the instrument playing the bass note. That's two totally different things. So let's stop right now. This is something that I notice pretty often with most boxed speakers. So I can't point fingers for more than a minute, so let's just get this out of the way. I am a biased reviewer when it comes to open baffle offerings, especially when it comes to bass quality. I personally enjoy hearing the instrument without any kind of box coloration or resonance being added to it. This might not be your cup of tea, and you might enjoy whatever sound the box brings to the sonic table, and you know what? That is totally okay with me. Either way, while there is an interesting sense of depth when it comes to bass extension of the PlatiMons, and they do hit quite low, to my ears, the bass quality, specifically chatting about texture and tone, does still sound like the bass instrument, whatever it is, plus the sound of the box being added to the bass instrument. As I continue listening, another noteworthy aspect emerged. Even though these aren't massive loudspeakers by any stretch, you can see them behind me, they seem to deliver a large-scale sound. Their performance sounds lifelike, and positioning of instruments is both believable and quite realistic. In terms of staging, the PlatiMons seem to place most of the mid-band information in the middle of the room, with the bass slightly further back, creating an interesting sense of space and depth. Air and extension is there, but I found myself having to lean in on some songs to extract some details that are sometimes easier to hear right out of the gate with other speakers. Now, when I hear this kind of presentation, it typically indicates that some upper harmonics or top end of the speaker might be voiced a little soft. I noticed this voicing in the recently reviewed Q Acoustic Concept 50s, and while it can be easier for longer listening sessions, some folks might want a little more fireworks in the upper band where harmonics and time domain information often reside. As I kept listening, and with the sound shed finally being under control, I felt like I was able to draw how these speakers were going to measure in my head. And while I wasn't spot on, I was pretty close as to what I saw when I got these on the bench. Later in the measurements, we'll unpack that more in detail. As I kept listening, the overall voicing of the speakers initially sounded well behaved, but perhaps sounded a little thicker or had a little more emphasis on the body. While I can't call it perfectly neutral or linear sounding, a lot of baritones or lower ranges in both male and female vocals might sound a little chesty. This combined with a deeper sense of bass and mid-bass did offer up a pleasant tone, but again, calling it perfectly neutral is something that I can't bring myself to do. I'll also mention a thicker or warmer sounding mid-bass or lower mid-band is typically preferred by a lot of listeners that I talk to, and having that warmth in the low end is truly subjective as to whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I personally enjoy this aspect of the speaker's tone and found the bottom half of the speaker, meaning lower mid-range and below the belt, easy to listen to for long listening sessions. However, when listening to female vocals, I did start noticing some distractions that caused me to pause and explore. Depending on female pitches, especially sopranos, I noticed that parts of their vocals sounded a little forward, and the top end of their harmonic content almost sounded disconnected to the body of the vocals. Now, anytime that I hear this, or to be specific, a part of the female voice that's poking out a little bit more than the body or lower part of her voice, I almost always expect to see something in the sensitive 1 to 3K range when I go to measure. Taking note of this, I kept listening, and over I noticed that for me, there indeed was a little bit of a disconnect in the upper end of female vocals. While nothing ever got fatiguing or sounding super abrasive, I just had a hard time pinpointing the vocals from time to time. Meaning, well, is she back at the mic or is she a few feet in front of me? There are times, dependent on her phrasing or whether she's using her chest voice or her head voice, that I felt that her positioning might change a little bit, and that for me broke the illusion of the performance, and I had a hard time unhearing it once I started to hear it. Switching gears over the next few days, I decided to throw as many amplifiers that I have on hand at the PlatiMons, just to iron out if there's any combinations that might sound better than others. The PlatiMon sensitivity is rated at 91 decibels, and they are 4 ohms, so they aren't incredibly hard to drive. In fact, I'll mention this now, their impedance measured looks well balanced end to end and almost hit the threshold of being considered a 6 ohm speaker. With that being said, I noticed that they do seem to respond with power and with current. It seemed to me like the more current that I could throw at these guys, the better they seem to sound or start to open up. While not a flamethrower by any stretch of the imagination, I have been very impressed with this little guy, the electro companion. I am the worst reviewer on the planet. I wish I could unsubscribe from my own channel. With the PlatiMons, this amp seemed to sound the sweetest, and while this curveball with the female vocals was still apparent, this amp did seem to soften the blow a little, and it was my favorite amp to use with these speakers. I also noticed that by changing the filter settings on my MADAC from NOS to OS over DSD, I did also seem to smooth things out a little bit more, and this was a good sign for those who might notice the same things that I'm noticing, and they want to at least manage or temper it to some degree. Now look, I want to be clear here. Just like I don't subscribe to the idea that EQ can fix a speaker with fundamental issues, I also don't think that pairing the right amp with the wrong speaker can save the day. What I will say, however, is that some amps might highlight one thing that you are noticing, either good or otherwise, more than another amplifier. In this example, the ECI 80 seems to forgive this behavior I was noticing a little more than the other amplifiers that I have in-house. Last, I got to thinking, you know, those little ball bearings, man, they sure do look cool. I love seeing things like this pop up, and I'd imagine that there is a reason that Monacoustics went in that direction. But what if, just what if, maybe an element of this sound that I'm hearing might actually be the sound of aluminum, and maybe, just maybe, those little ball bearings are perhaps doing something with that aluminum sound, and maybe, just maybe, that's being added or subtracted from the music. Now, I know that Monacoustics considers these ball bearings as decoupling devices, so one would think that my maybes would be shot down in a quick hurry. But without getting into the weeds or adding any kind of unnecessary drama, I humbly disagree with the notion that these ball bearings are decouplers. Any hard surface touching another hard surface is going to couple these surfaces together. And for sure, these ball bearings will still transmit energy into whatever it is that they're sitting on. But you know what? This requires some investigation, so there is only one way to find out. These guys right here. These are ISO Acoustics dampers, and what these will do, these will just grab whatever resonance that they can, and in theory, tell that resonance to shut their dang mouth. I've had pretty good luck with these, trying them under monitors before, and knowing that I'm hearing something in these speakers that's standing out, I decided to give it a try, and can you guess what happened next? Yeah, at least for me, I do think that things moved in the right direction. Now, this was interesting, and it got me thinking, well, why don't I just try some sound clips and slam dunk this theory and call this review a done deal? Well, I tried. And to be completely honest with you, if there was a difference, which I do think there is, it was so subtle in the recording that there was no way of helping you guys understand what the heck it is that I'm rambling about. So, I knew it had to be done. And while most manufacturers don't love the notion of comparisons, I knew this was one time that I had to bring another set of speakers onto the dance floor to help illustrate what in the what is going on here. Now, I've given this some serious thought, and I've decided, for better or for worse, that you knowing the pair of speakers you are going to be listening to back to back with the PlatiMons isn't super important. That's going to bum a lot of people out, but just hang in there for a second. This review is not about those speakers, and this demonstration isn't about which one of these speakers is necessarily better. It's about helping you understand what I'm hearing in an interactive way. Also, I'm going to make you a promise. When I do review these speakers, which is going to be very soon, I'll be sure to let you know what these are and why I love them so much when it comes to the human voice. So, toss on some headphones and let's get back to work. I recorded a number of songs for this demo, but when I started the editing process, it occurred to me that this is going to be a lot easier than I initially thought. So, this is how this is all going to go. I will play the clip recorded with the PlatiMons. This clip features a female vocal and acoustic guitar. Pay attention to the sound of her voice and specifically the top end of her vocals. Are you ready? Here we go.
Thin, thin skin, I'm underwater. Is this really happening?
Got it? Okay. Let's play that phrase back one more time.
Thin, thin skin, I'm underwater. Is this really happening?
And now, let's play this other set of speakers playing the exact same phrase.
Thin, thin skin, I'm underwater. Is this really happening?
Okay. And now a second time.
Thin, thin skin, I'm underwater. Is this really happening?
And now, let's play these back to back.
Thin, thin skin, I'm underwater. Is this really happening? Thin, thin skin, I'm underwater. Is this really happening?
I don't know if you're already trekking with me, but on the PlatiMons, I hear the body, and perhaps even a little more emphasis on the body, which is something that I mentioned earlier. At the same time, I can hear the top end of her voice, and any articulation of the S sounds is coming through. But when compared to this other speaker, I am able to hear a completed picture of the complete resolution of her voice. That is to say, I'm not just hearing the body of her chest voice and her head voice, but I'm hearing the connection between the two. Let's make this even easier to hear and repeat the same process playing the same track, except I'll isolate her voice from the acoustic guitar so all we hear is just her vocals. And here is the PlatiMon.
Thin, thin skin, I'm underwater. Is this really happening?
And again.
Thin, thin skin, I'm underwater. Is this really happening?
Good. And now this second pair of speakers.
Thin, thin skin, I'm underwater. Is this really happening?
And a second time.
Thin, thin skin, I'm underwater. Is this really happening?
And now we will play them back to back.
Thin, thin skin, I'm underwater. Is this really happening? Thin, thin skin, I'm underwater. Is this really happening?
So you tell me what you hear. I gotta say, I didn't expect this demo to perfectly display what it is that I'm latching onto with these speakers, and it's my hope that you can walk away from this review with a better idea of what to expect with the PlatiMons. Again, the point here isn't so much to tell you which one is right or which one is wrong. It is to help you understand what I'm describing and connect the dots for yourself. By all means, if you fell in love with the way the PlatiMons played that track back, and you think that's the sound that you are searching for, then as far as I'm concerned, I have done my job and done it well. The same can be said that if you didn't like how the PlatiMons rendered that track and also find my description to be the same as yours, then it's a double win, because now I'm getting the PlatiMons in the right homes, and I'm also preventing them from ending up in the wrong homes. Either way, with most, if not all instruments being played besides piano, I didn't notice this disconnect as much as I did with the vocals. It's not that it totally disappears, but it's just more noticeable with information that's sitting in the middle of the mix. And of course, 9 times out of 10, that's exactly what we have with vocals. With side information or panned electric, acoustic, and percussive instruments, the PlatiMon sounded pretty nice. With just enough fireworks to keep things interesting, I didn't have a ton of complaints while listening to music, minus vocal content. I'd imagine for listeners who spend more time listening to this type of music, you might not ever notice this disconnect that I was rambling about with the vocal content information. All right, on access for the PlatiMons show a couple of interesting things that I believe make sense of what I'm hearing. First, take note of the rise in response starting around 600 Hertz and descending around 1500 Hertz. This peak, which we can also see in the spectral decay here, does appear to show some stored energy, and it's much easier to see when looking top down as shown in this graph. If you remember, I noticed some parts of the female vocals, mainly higher pitched sopranos, sounding disconnected at times. Taking into account that sopranos' vocals range starts from middle C or around 260 Hertz up to soprano C, which is, would you know it, right around 1000 Hertz, or higher in operatic music, it's understandable as to why some of these notes poked out more than others. Remember, in the event where we see stored energy, this means that those particular frequencies tend to hang out longer than others, which in my experience is audible and is worth chatting about. But I want to be clear about something, and I want to be a responsible reviewer. Even though this stored energy has been measured, it's important to note it's also under 3 milliseconds. Getting to the point, I don't think this is what I was hearing, and or if it was, I don't think it's the only thing I was hearing. While I am speculating here, I believe what's going on is a couple of things. I believe it's possible this enclosure might be adding its own sound to the music signal. Also, I don't know what it is about air motion tweeters and me. We've had a weird relationship. They seem to have a sound. Some people like them and some people don't. Being transparent, I have found myself more in camp 2, and I feel like AMTs often call attention to themselves with whatever the sound is that I think that I'm hearing coming from them. Either way, don't freak out about the measurements here. They aren't that bad, even if they do match up with my observations. Back to the response, after this rise we noted, we do see one smaller rise around 2500, and then a fishbowl or a shallow dip in the response that extends from 3500 all the way up to 15K. So again, when I mentioned that I found myself having to lean in a little more to hear top-end harmonics and details in the time domain of treble, well, this pretty much sums up exactly why that's true. Taking a look at the horizontal response, the PlatiMons came out of the gate swinging up to 20 degrees, which is in yellow. However, as soon as we hit 30 and 40 degrees in both green and blue, we see a nosedive in directivity. Now, I admit I am not smart enough to know exactly what's causing this, but having measured many speakers before, especially with waveguides, it was surprising to see this response. I expected a tighter grouping and less of a drop in the horizontal plane. As for its vertical response, we do see another couple of drops in the response, and one that I would imagine is right at the crossover point, right around 3500 to 4K. Past that, the vertical does show a somewhat even fall away, but again, not a tight grouping, which means the overall response, known as the power response or room response, could be affected and will have an effect on the sweet spot's height and width of these speakers. In closing, the PlatiMons from Monacoustics present a unique combination of strengths and nuances. The build quality and design of these are top-notch, perfect, showcasing an all-aluminum enclosure and precise craftsmanship. Their bass performance with the intriguing dual port design delivers depth and bass notes that are sure to impress. The speakers managed to create a lifelike and spacious soundstage, positioning instruments with believability and realism. However, there are some trade-offs in voicing, especially in upper frequencies, where female vocals can exhibit a forward emphasis and perhaps a disconnect that showcases the complete picture of the human voice. While the PlatiMons excel in instrumental and non-vocal content, the challenge lies in achieving that same level of cohesion in vocal performances. These speakers are an interesting addition to the audiophile landscape, offering a mix of strengths and quirks, making them worth considering only if they align with your specific listening preferences and types of music that you happen to enjoy. And with that, I'm going to take a nap for 3 days because this one was a tough one. I'll see you guys in the next video.